My wife's comment appeared under my post before I could even put my phone down. You have one. 3 words. That was all it took to turn a joke into the most humiliating moment of my marriage. The post itself was harmless. At least, that was what I had told myself when I wrote it. No wife, no rules. I had posted it at 11:47 p.m., sitting alone at our kitchen counter with a cold cup of coffee beside me. It was our 5th wedding anniversary. My wife, Vivian Hale, had forgotten. Not because she was careless. Because she was the CEO of Hale Dynamics, a company that had grown from a small software studio into one of the most valuable technology firms in the city. Her phone never stopped ringing. Her schedule never stopped moving. And apparently, neither did the world without me. I had waited until midnight. Then 1 in the morning. At 1:23, I finally took off the shirt I had ironed for dinner and changed into an old t-shirt. I ordered noodles. I opened my social media account. And, mostly because I was tired and a little hurt, I typed, "No wife, no rules." I expected maybe 3 friends to laugh. Instead, the post exploded. Hundreds of comments appeared within minutes. Then thousands. Someone had apparently recognized my username. Someone else tagged Vivian. And 5 minutes later, her verified CEO account appeared beneath my post. You have one. People went crazy. Wait, CEO Vivian is his wife? You're married to Vivian Hale? Bro just exposed his marriage for fun. She actually replied. I stared at the screen. For a few seconds, I smiled. Not because it was funny, because seeing her write those words reminded me of something I hadn't felt in a long time. She remembered. She knew. She still considered herself my wife. I almost replied with a joke. Then my phone rang. Vivian. I answered. Hello. Delete the post. No greeting. No laughter. Just that. I looked at the comment again. You already replied. That doesn't matter. Her voice was cold, controlled, professional. The same voice she used during investor meetings. It was a joke, I said. It wasn't a good one. I swallowed. It was our anniversary. Silence. I heard keyboard clicks on her side. Then she said, I know. You know? Yes. And you forgot dinner. I had a board meeting. You could have called. I was busy. Something inside me went quiet. I didn't argue. I had argued before. I had begged before. I had waited before. 5 years of marriage had taught me exactly how far Vivian could stretch the word busy. I'll delete it, I said. Good. The call ended. I stared at the screen for another minute. Then I deleted the post. But I didn't delete her comment. I couldn't. Maybe because those 3 words had hurt more than they should have. Or maybe because somewhere inside me, the foolish part still believed they meant something. We had met 8 years earlier in a tiny university cafe. Vivian had been sitting alone with 6 books open around her. I had accidentally knocked over her coffee. She looked at the spreading brown stain on her notes. Then she looked at me. You're dead. I had panicked. I can pay for them. You can't pay for the notes. I can rewrite them. You don't even know what's written there. I'll learn. She had stared at me for 3 seconds. Then laughed. That was how we met. She was ambitious. I was patient. She wanted to build something enormous. I wanted to build something meaningful. At the time, we thought those were the same thing. When Vivian started Hale Dynamics, I was the person who stayed awake beside her while she worked. I cooked. I handled appointments. I listened when investors rejected her. I was there when she cried after her first major failure. And when the company finally succeeded, I was the first person she hugged. You believed in me when nobody else did, she whispered that night. I smiled. I always will. I didn't know then that one day those words would become the chain that kept me trapped. 3 weeks after the anniversary, things became worse. Vivian announced a new partnership with a venture capitalist named Adrian Cross. Adrian was young, polished, wealthy, and constantly photographed beside her. I didn't care about appearances. I trusted my wife. At least, I thought I did. Then one evening, I found a document on the dining table. A separation agreement. My hands went cold. Vivian walked into the room. She stopped when she saw me holding it. That's not what you think. I looked at her. What am I supposed to think? She sighed. It's temporary. Temporary what? A legal separation. I laughed once. It sounded strange even to me. Why? Our investors are nervous. I stared at her. What does that have to do with our marriage? They want stability. We've been married for 5 years. I know. Then why hide it? Vivian didn't answer immediately. That silence told me more than words could. Finally, she said, because people are talking. About what? About you. My chest tightened. Me? They think you're distracting me. I couldn't speak. Vivian continued quietly. They think I spend too much time worrying about you. I looked down at the agreement. There it was. My marriage had become a liability on a balance sheet. And somehow, I was the liability. I didn't sign the agreement that night. I simply placed it back on the table. Vivian watched me carefully. Ethan. I looked up. What? You know I don't mean this personally. That sentence almost made me laugh. How could something involving our marriage possibly be impersonal? You're asking me to pretend I'm not your husband. Just for 6 months. And after 6 months? We'll reassess. I nodded slowly. Reassess. She walked closer. You'll still live here. As what? Her expression tightened. Don't make this difficult. That was when I realized something. She wasn't asking. She had already decided. She simply wanted me to make her decision painless. I looked at her hand. The wedding ring was still there. Mine was too. 5 years ago, we'd bought them from a small shop because neither of us had much money. Vivian had laughed when I asked if she wanted something more expensive. No, she said. I want something that reminds me where we started. I had believed her. Now I wondered if she remembered those words at all. I'll think about it, I said. She seemed relieved. Thank you. After she went upstairs, I stayed in the kitchen. For the first time in years, I didn't follow her. I didn't ask her to come back. I didn't ask her to explain. I didn't even cry. I simply sat there and stared at my hands. The next morning, Vivian left for work without saying goodbye. I made breakfast anyway. Old habits were difficult to kill, but I stopped waiting for her. That was the beginning. I became quieter. When she came home late, I didn't ask where she'd been. When she canceled dinner, I didn't complain. When she told me she was attending a 3-day conference with Adrian, I only nodded. She noticed. Of course she noticed. One night, she put down her phone and asked, "Are you angry?" "No. You've been distant." "I've been busy." "With what?" I almost smiled. "Life." She frowned. "You're acting strange." "I don't think I'm acting strange." "You don't talk anymore." I looked at her. "You told me I was distracting you." Her expression changed. "I didn't mean it like that." "But you said it." She looked away. I didn't continue. That was new for me. Before, I would have spent hours explaining how much her words hurt. Now I was beginning to understand that some people don't need more explanations. They need consequences. 2 weeks later came the second betrayal. I discovered that Vivian had already told several senior executives that our marriage was effectively over. Not separated. Not complicated. Over. She had apparently told them I was preparing to move out. I confronted her that evening. "You told them we're divorced?" "No. You told them we're effectively over." Vivian rubbed her forehead. It was easier for them to understand. I stared at her. Easier. Yes. I nodded. Right. She stepped toward me. "Ethan, please don't turn this into something dramatic." "I won't." That answer surprised her. Maybe it surprised me too. I walked past her. "Where are you going?" "To my study." "What for?" "I have work." She gave a small, frustrated sigh. "You don't have to work tonight." "I know." I closed the door. Inside the study was the one thing Vivian had never cared about. My old laptop. For years, she assumed I used it to manage household finances and occasionally help her review presentations. She never knew what else I did. I had been building something quietly. Not because I wanted to surprise her. Not anymore. I had started it years earlier, before Hail Dynamics became successful. A predictive logistics system. A piece of software that could analyze shipping delays, inventory movement, weather patterns, fuel costs, and thousands of other variables to predict supply disruptions before they happened. I had never shown it to Vivian. Not because I lacked confidence. Because I wanted to finish it first. And because, somewhere in my heart, I had once imagined giving it to her company as a gift. That night, I opened the program. A warning appeared on the screen. Prototype accuracy, 91.8%. I stared at the number. Then I whispered to myself, maybe it's time. The next morning, Vivian left for another meeting. She kissed the air beside my cheek without realizing she'd done it. I watched her car disappear through the gate. Then I returned to my study. I opened a blank document. At the top, I typed a name. Northstar Systems. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't a threat. It was simply the first thing I had ever built entirely for myself. And I had no idea yet that within a few months, the same people who had called me a distraction would be fighting to discover who was behind it. 3 days after I typed the name Northstar Systems, I resigned from the only role I had ever officially held at Hail Dynamics. Not as an executive, Not as a shareholder. Not even as someone important enough to have a title people remembered. I had been listed as a strategic consultant, mostly because Vivian had once insisted that I needed something formal on paper. In reality, I had spent years quietly solving problems nobody noticed. A supply chain bottleneck here. A software integration there. A customer complaint that could have become a lawsuit. I had always worked behind the curtain. That was exactly how Vivian liked it. When I walked into her office with my resignation letter, she was on a video call with 12 executives. She saw me through the glass wall. I waited. 5 minutes later, she came out. What happened? I resigned. She blinked. You're resigning from Hale Dynamics? Yes. Why? I handed her the envelope. She didn't open it. Is this because of the separation agreement? No. Then what is it? I looked at her. I think it's time I stopped being your shadow. Her expression hardened. You're being emotional. Maybe. You'll regret making decisions like this. I've regretted staying quiet more. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then Vivian lowered her voice. If you leave now, don't expect me to keep supporting you financially. I almost smiled. I won't. She seemed genuinely confused. You don't have a job. I'll manage. With what? I thought about telling her. I thought about explaining North Star. Instead, I simply said, I'll figure it out. She shook her head. Ethan, this isn't a game. I know. Then I walked away. That afternoon, I rented a tiny office on the 4th floor of an old building across town. It had peeling paint, one broken window, and a radiator that made a terrible banging sound every 20 minutes. I loved it. For the first time in years, nobody knew who I was. The landlord asked what kind of company I ran. I told him, a software company. He looked at the empty room. Just you. For now. He laughed. Good luck. I needed it. The first month was brutal. My prototype worked beautifully on controlled data. Real-world data was different. There were missing records, bad sensors, unpredictable human behavior. One morning, I discovered that the system had predicted a warehouse shortage 3 weeks early, but only because I had accidentally trained it on duplicated data. I stared at the error report for nearly an hour. Then I laughed. Back to zero. I spent the next 14 hours fixing it. At 3 a.m., I finally leaned back in my chair. My phone showed 17 missed calls. None were from Vivian. For some reason, that hurt more than it should have. Then I realized why. I had spent 5 years measuring my worth by whether she needed me. Now she didn't. That truth was painful, but it was also freeing. 2 weeks later, my first real opportunity appeared. A regional food distributor named Greenmart agreed to test North Star. They gave me access to 1 year's worth of logistics data. I promised them nothing except this. If my system doesn't save you money, don't pay me. Their operations director, Marcus Bell, laughed. You're either very confident or very stupid. Probably both. We ran the test. North Star identified 3 routes where delivery delays were likely to occur. Marcus ignored 2. He followed the 3rd. A storm hit the next day. The route North Star flagged was shut down for 16 hours. Greenmart avoided the loss. Marcus called me that night. Ethan, what exactly did you build? I looked at the dashboard. Something that tells companies where they're about to lose money. There was silence. Then he said, how soon can you scale it? I smiled. That was the first time someone had asked me that question. Not what can Vivian Hale do with you? Not how useful are you to her? Just, what did you build? I didn't realize it yet, but that phone call changed everything. Meanwhile, back at the Hale mansion, Vivian's life continued exactly as before. At least, that was what she believed. She worked. She attended meetings. She traveled. She appeared beside Adrian at conferences. And whenever someone asked about me, she gave the same answer. Ethan needed some space. Everyone assumed I'd come back. Even Vivian. Because for years, whenever she pushed me away, I eventually returned. But this time, something was different. I wasn't waiting outside the door. I was building another one. 6 weeks after I left, Vivian finally called me. I was standing in the North Star office at 10:40 p.m., staring at a spreadsheet that refused to balance. My phone vibrated. Vivian. I almost ignored it. Then I answered. Hello. Where are you? At work. It's almost 11. I know. She paused. You've been working? Yes. For 6 weeks. Mostly. You didn't tell me. I smiled faintly. You didn't ask. Silence. Then she said, we need to talk. I have work. Ethan. Her tone carried the old authority. The voice that used to make me stop whatever I was doing. It didn't anymore. I'll be home Sunday, I said. You're not living here anymore. No. Another silence. Are you seeing someone? The question caught me completely off guard. No. Then why won't you come home? I leaned against the desk. Because it doesn't feel like home. She didn't answer. For the first time, I heard something unfamiliar in her voice. Uncertainty. Did I do something? I closed my eyes. There it was. The question I'd once begged her to ask. Now that she finally asked it, I didn't know what to say. You made choices? I replied. Everyone makes choices. Yes. Then why are you punishing me? I am not punishing you. Then what are you doing? I looked around the tiny office. My life. She hung up. I didn't call back. The following week, Greenmart signed a 12-month contract. Then another company approached us. Then another. Northstar grew slowly, but steadily. I hired my first employee, Lena Ortiz, a brilliant data engineer who had been rejected by 3 major firms because she lacked the right connections. She understood me immediately. During our first interview, she asked, "Why are you building this?" I told her the truth. Because I got tired of watching good decisions arrive too late. She smiled. That sounds personal. It is. She didn't ask more. I appreciated that. Within 3 months, our little office had 6 people. We still drank cheap coffee. We still argued over code. We still celebrated every new contract like we had won a championship. And slowly, I stopped thinking about Vivian every morning. That was when I realized I was healing. Not because I hated her. Because I had finally become interested in my own future. Then came the first major test. A shipping company with operations across 3 countries asked Northstar to predict disruptions across its entire network. The contract was worth more money than I had ever personally handled. I spent 9 straight days working on it. On the 10th morning, the system produced something unexpected. A warning. One of the company's largest suppliers was about to fail. Not next year. Not next quarter. Within 30 days. The executives didn't believe me. I presented the data. They challenged every assumption. I answered every question. Finally, their CEO said, "We'll investigate." 3 weeks later, the supplier filed for bankruptcy. The contract expanded. Then the news reached the technology press. Not my name. Not yet. Just the company. Mysterious logistics startup prevents major supply chain losses. Vivian saw the article. She was having breakfast with Adrian when she read it. "What?" Adrian asked. She didn't answer. She was staring at the screen. Northstar Systems. The name looked familiar. Then she remembered. My old laptop. The nights I used to disappear into the study. The strange diagrams on my desk. The times I had told her, "I'm working on something." She had always assumed it was another one of my hobbies. Her fingers tightened around the phone. "What's wrong?" Adrian asked. Vivian looked up. Nothing. But it wasn't nothing. That evening, she went into the old house study. My desk was still there. The drawers were mostly empty. She opened the bottom one. Inside was an old notebook. She recognized the handwriting immediately. Mine. She turned the pages. Equations. Flowcharts. Market projections. Dates. Ideas. And on the final page, written in ink years earlier, was a sentence. If I can make this work, maybe someday Vivian won't have to choose between growth and people. Vivian stopped breathing. She sat down slowly. For the first time, she understood. The thing I had been building hadn't started after I left. It had started while I was still beside her. While I was cooking her dinners. While I was waiting for her anniversary call. While she was telling investors that I was a distraction. Northstar wasn't born from revenge. It had been born from love. And now that love was becoming a company she could no longer control. She turned another page. At the bottom was a date. 5 years earlier. The year we got married. Vivian whispered my name. Then, for the first time since our separation began, she looked genuinely afraid. Because she was beginning to realize something far more painful than losing her husband. She might have spent years failing to see the man she married. Vivian did not call me the next morning. She called Lena instead. I knew because Lena walked into my office holding her phone with an expression I had never seen before. "Your wife is asking questions." I looked up from my screen. "What kind?" "About Northstar." I leaned back. "What did you tell her?" "Nothing confidential." "Good." Lena hesitated. She sounded scared. I looked back at my laptop. "That isn't my problem." The words came out calmly. But they didn't feel cruel. They felt like a boundary. A month earlier, I would have dropped everything the moment Vivian sounded upset. Now I had learned something uncomfortable. Someone else's panic did not automatically become my responsibility. Still, the past had a way of finding cracks in the present. That afternoon, Vivian showed up at my office. No assistants. No security team. No Adrian. Just Vivian. She stood in the doorway wearing the same dark coat she had worn on the day we signed our first apartment lease. For 1 second, I was 28 again. She was laughing. I was carrying 2 boxes. We were arguing about whether the bedroom needed curtains. The memory vanished as quickly as it came. "Can I come in?" she asked. I nodded. She sat opposite me. Her eyes moved around the room. "You built all this." "Not alone." She looked at the 6 desks. "The company is growing." "Yes." "Why didn't you tell me?" I smiled faintly. "You never asked." Her face tightened. "I've asked now." "I know." She placed a folder on my desk. "I want to invest." I didn't touch it. "No. You haven't even looked." "I don't need to." "Ethan, Northstar could become enormous." "I know. You could use Hale Dynamics infrastructure." "I don't want it." "You could expand internationally." "We're already preparing to." She stared at me. There was something almost vulnerable in her expression. "You're doing this without me." I looked at her. "That was the idea." She lowered her eyes. "I didn't know." "I know." She swallowed. "Did you ever plan to tell me?" I thought about the old notebook. About the version of me who had once imagined placing this technology in her hands. "Yes," I said. Her eyes lifted. Before you decided I was a distraction." She flinched. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. "You didn't just ask me to leave the company," I continued. "You asked me to pretend our marriage didn't exist. Then you told people we were basically finished. You made me feel like the 5 years we spent together were an inconvenience." I was under pressure. "I know. I thought I was protecting the company." "I know. I thought we'd fix everything later." I nodded. "That was the problem." She frowned. "What do you mean?" "You kept asking me to wait for the version of our life that would begin after everything else was finished." Her lips parted. I continued quietly. There was always another meeting. Another investor. Another crisis. Another quarter. I looked at the wedding ring on her finger, and I kept believing that eventually I'd become important enough for you to choose. She looked down. "You were always important." "Important isn't the same as chosen." The room became silent. Vivian wiped beneath one eye. "I never cheated on you." "I know. I never stopped loving you." I believed her. That was what made it harder. "You don't have to stop loving someone to hurt them," I said. She looked at me for a long time. Then she asked the question neither of us had wanted to say. "Is there someone else?" "No." "Then maybe there's still a chance." I shook my head. "Not like this." Her voice became smaller. "What would it take?" I looked at her. "Nothing." She stared at me. "Nothing. I don't want a price for forgiveness." Her eyes filled. "I don't understand." "I forgive you." She looked stunned. "But I don't want to go back." That was the first time I saw her truly break. Not dramatically. She simply sat there, silent, tears slipping down her cheeks. I didn't move toward her. That was the hardest thing I had ever done, because some part of me still wanted to comfort her. But comfort had always been my weakness. I had spent years healing wounds I hadn't caused. This time, I let her feel hers. She stood after several minutes. At the door, she stopped. "Do you hate me?" I shook my head. "No." "Then why does this feel worse?" I looked at her. "Because you finally understand that I mean goodbye." She left. And for the first time, I didn't watch her walk away. I turned back to my work. Northstar received its largest contract 2 months later. A European logistics consortium offered us a partnership that would put our system into ports across 7 countries. Lena stared at the contract. "Ethan, what? This is insane." I laughed. "Good insane or bad insane?" "Good." She dropped the papers on my desk. "You realize what this means?" "Yes." "No. I don't think you do." I looked at the figures again. She was right. Northstar wasn't a small startup anymore. We were becoming a serious company. But I refused to let success turn me into the person I had spent years trying to escape. We hired carefully. We built slowly. I created a policy that no employee would be expected to sacrifice family for the company unless there was a genuine emergency. Lena noticed. "You're serious about this?" "Very." "Why?" I thought for a moment. "Because companies shouldn't consume people." She smiled. "You're going to make our competitors hate you." "That's okay." Our growth accelerated. And with it came attention. A business magazine published a profile on Northstar. The headline read, "The quiet engineer who built the future of logistics." For the first time, My photograph appeared beside my name. Ethan Hale. The surname caused a storm. People connected the dots. Vivian Hale. Hale Dynamics. The husband who had supposedly disappeared. The mysterious founder of Northstar. Within 24 hours, every major business outlet was discussing the connection. I received dozens of interview requests. I declined most of them. One journalist asked me directly, "Did you build Northstar because of your separation from Vivian Hale?" I answered no. "Then why did you leave Hale Dynamics?" "Because I needed to know who I was outside my marriage." The clip went viral. Vivian watched it alone in her office. Adrian walked in. "You're everywhere." She didn't respond. He looked at the screen. "You should leverage this." Vivian finally turned. "What do you mean? Partner with Northstar?" "No." "Why?" "Because he doesn't want us." Adrian frowned. "You're his wife." "Not anymore." He studied her. "Do you still love him?" Vivian didn't answer. That was enough. A week later, Hale Dynamics board requested a meeting. The company had been under pressure since Northstar's rise. Several clients were considering switching systems. Northstar's technology was simply better. During the board meeting, one director asked Vivian a question that silenced the room. "Did you know your husband was developing this technology while he was still with you?" Vivian stared at the table. "Yes." "You knew?" "No." She corrected herself. "I knew he was working on something. I didn't understand what." Another director leaned forward. "Did you ever ask?" Vivian closed her eyes. "No." The director sighed. "That may have been a costly mistake. But the consequences became more serious when an internal audit uncovered something else." Adrian had been pushing Hale Dynamics to terminate several smaller logistics clients and redirect them toward a company controlled by one of his investment partners. The arrangement violated internal conflict of interest rules. Vivian was furious. "You told me these decisions were strategic." "They were." "You never disclosed the ownership." Adrian's expression hardened. "You're angry because your husband built a competing company. This has nothing to do with Ethan." "Everything has to do with Ethan now." Vivian stood. "Leave." He laughed bitterly. "You think you can save the company by becoming sentimental?" "No." She looked him straight in the eye. "I think I can save it by finally paying attention." Adrian left. The investigation began. Within weeks, several contracts were suspended. The board removed him from operational authority. Vivian survived the crisis, but the damage was real. Her company was no longer untouchable. And for the first time in years, Vivian had to confront a truth she had avoided. She had spent so long protecting Hale Dynamics that she had forgotten the reason she had built it. People, trust, a future, everything she had once valued, everything she had slowly sacrificed. Meanwhile, my life had become quieter. I bought a small house outside the city. Nothing luxurious. Just a garden, a workshop, and enough space for a dog I had adopted from a shelter. His name was Milo. He followed me everywhere. For the first time, I ate dinner without checking whether Vivian would be home. For the first time, silence didn't feel like abandonment. Then, one rainy evening, I received a message from an unknown number. I know I have no right to ask this, but could we meet once? I knew immediately who it was. I stared at the message. Then another appeared. Not as husband and wife, just as two people who once loved each other. I didn't answer that night, but the past had finally stopped knocking. Now it was standing at my door. I agreed to meet Vivian 3 days later. Not because I wanted her back. Not because I expected an apology to change anything. I agreed because there were still questions I had never asked. We met at the little cafe where we had first spoken 8 years earlier. The place had changed. The tables were newer. The walls had been repainted. But the window seat was still there. I sat across from Vivian. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then she smiled sadly. "You still order black coffee. And you still order too much sugar." She looked down at her cup. I remember everything. I believed her. That was the strange thing about regret. Sometimes people remembered perfectly. They just understood too late. She took a breath. "I investigated Adrian. I heard. He manipulated several contracts." "I heard that too. He's facing legal action." I nodded. I didn't know how much control he'd gained. "You trusted him?" "Yes." She looked at me. "And I didn't trust you enough." I didn't answer. She continued. "I thought you were comfortable." I was. "I thought you didn't have ambitions." "I had ambitions." "Why didn't you tell me?" I smiled faintly. "Because whenever I tried, you were busy." She closed her eyes. "I deserve that." "No." She looked confused. "I don't want to punish you." "Then what do you want?" "Nothing." That answer seemed to hurt her. I understood why. People often imagine closure as a transaction, an apology, a confession, a second chance. But sometimes closure was simply accepting that there would be no return. Vivian reached into her bag and placed something on the table. My old wedding photograph. I stared at it. You kept this. I found it in a box. She turned it toward me. We were standing outside the courthouse, both laughing because it had started raining. I remembered that day. Vivian had forgotten an umbrella. I had taken off my jacket and held it over her head. She had complained that my shoulder was getting soaked. I told her I didn't care. She had kissed me. The memory hit harder than I expected. Vivian whispered, I was happy. So was I. Then where did we go wrong? I looked through the window. People were walking past with umbrellas. I think we confused love with endurance. She frowned. We thought if we loved each other, we could survive anything. And we survived. I looked back at her. But we weren't living. Tears appeared in her eyes. I still want to try. I shook my head. Vivian, please. I can't. You don't even have to come back immediately. I know. We could start again. You don't understand. What? I don't want to start again. She went silent. I want to continue. She stared at me. My life already moved forward. Her lips trembled. Without me. Yes. That was the truth she had feared most. I wasn't waiting. I wasn't secretly hoping. I wasn't keeping a door open. I had built a life that continued whether she entered it or not. She nodded slowly. Then she asked, Is there someone else? I smiled. No. Would you tell me if there were? Yes. She looked down. I wish I had been better. I wish you had been too. That answer made her laugh through her tears. I deserve that one. Maybe she did. But I wasn't interested in making her suffer. We sat together for another hour. We talked about university, our first apartment, the ridiculous sofa we bought because it was on sale, the night she burned pasta while trying to impress me, the first time Hail Dynamics made a profit, the night she cried in my arms after her first major investor rejected her. For the first time, our memories didn't feel like weapons. They were simply memories. Beautiful things that had happened. Things that didn't need to happen again. When we finally stood, Vivian asked one last question. Can I keep loving you? I looked at her. You can feel whatever you feel. And you? I'll always care about you. She closed her eyes. That isn't the same. No. I know. We walked outside. At the corner, she stopped. I'll sign the final divorce papers. I nodded. Thank you. She stared at me. You really are leaving. I already left. She looked at me for several seconds. Then she nodded. I know. This time, when she walked away, I watched. Not because I wanted her back. Because I wanted to remember the last time. The divorce became official 6 weeks later. There was no courtroom drama. No public fight. No scandalous interview. Just 2 signatures. 2 people who had once promised forever, acknowledging that forever had ended. When I walked out of the building, I expected to feel something enormous. Instead, I felt strangely light. Lena was waiting outside. She looked at me. Well, I held up the document. It's done. She smiled. Congratulations? I laughed. That's a terrible thing to congratulate someone for. Fair. She handed me a coffee. Then what do you call it? I looked at the paper. A beginning. That evening, Northstar celebrated its first major international launch. We rented a small restaurant. No expensive champagne. No celebrity guests. Just my team. People who had believed in the company when it was 6 desks and a broken radiator. Marcus Bell from Green Mart raised his glass. To Ethan. Everyone applauded. I stood awkwardly. I didn't do this alone. Lena shook her head. You're allowed to accept praise. I smiled. All right. I raised my glass. To everyone who took a chance on something that didn't exist yet. That night, I realized something. Success felt different when nobody was standing beside me waiting to decide whether I deserved it. I didn't need Vivian to admire Northstar. I admired it myself. And that was enough. Then something unexpected happened. A woman named Clara Bennett joined our advisory board. She wasn't impressed by my surname. In fact, she didn't even know it at first. She knew Northstar. She knew our technology. And she knew that I had rejected 3 aggressive acquisition offers because I didn't want the company to become another corporation obsessed with quarterly numbers. Our first meeting lasted 4 hours. At the end, she said, You're stubborn. I laughed. So I've been told. It's a compliment. That's new. She smiled. You're building something unusual. So are you. Clara raised an eyebrow. Careful. Why? You're beginning to sound interested. I might be. She smiled. Good. Nothing dramatic happened after that. No instant romance. No desperate declarations. We simply started talking, then having coffee, then dinners. She listened. Actually listened. When I spoke about North Star, she didn't look at her phone. When I was tired, she didn't tell me I was becoming an obstacle. When I disagreed with her, she didn't punish me with silence. And when I told her about Vivian, she didn't compete with a woman from my past. She simply said, "I'm not here to replace anyone." I looked at her. "I know. I want to know who you are now." That sentence stayed with me. Because for years, I had been someone's husband before I had been Ethan. With Clara, I didn't have to prove anything. I could just exist. Meanwhile, Vivian was rebuilding Hale Dynamics. The board forced major structural changes. Adrian's conflict of interest scheme became public after the investigation concluded. He lost his position and faced financial penalties. Several executives resigned. Vivian stayed, not because she wanted to preserve her pride, because she wanted to repair what she had damaged. She reduced her travel schedule, rebuilt the internal compliance team, started meeting employees personally, and, according to Lena, she stopped treating every problem like a number. Months later, Hale Dynamics invited North Star to discuss a potential partnership. I almost declined. Then I read the proposal. It was professional, fair, no hidden conditions, no attempt to control my company. I agreed. The meeting was held in a conference room on the 32nd floor. Vivian was waiting when I arrived. For a second, we both froze. She looked different. Not physically. She simply seemed quieter, less guarded. She extended her hand. "Mr. Hale." I smiled. "Ms. Hale." Our hands met. The irony wasn't lost on either of us. Once, that hand had worn my wedding ring. Now it was simply a handshake. We sat across from each other with 6 executives between us. The meeting lasted 2 hours. We discussed pricing, integration, data security, expansion, nothing personal. When it ended, Vivian walked me to the elevator. "Thank you for considering the partnership." "You're welcome." She hesitated. "I'm proud of you." I looked at her. "Thank you." She smiled. "I used to think that if I lost you, I'd lose everything." I waited. Now I understand I was wrong. The elevator doors opened. She looked at me. "You built your life without needing me." "Yes. And somehow that makes me happy." I nodded. "I'm glad." The doors began to close. Just before they did, she said, "Ethan." "Yes. I finally understand your post." I almost laughed. "No wife, no rules." She smiled sadly. "You were never asking for freedom from marriage." I shook my head. "No. You were asking whether anyone noticed you were lonely." The doors closed. I stood inside the elevator. For the first time, those words didn't hurt. They simply felt true. And somewhere between the 32nd floor and the lobby, I realized I had finally stopped wondering whether Vivian regretted losing me. She did. But her regret no longer mattered to my future, because my future was already waiting for me. 6 months later, North Star moved into its first proper headquarters. It wasn't a glass tower. It wasn't designed to impress investors. It was an old warehouse we had renovated into a bright, open workspace with large windows, meeting rooms, a small kitchen, and a garden on the roof. Lena walked beside me during the opening. "You know what I like most?" "What?" "You didn't put your name on the building." I smiled. "Why would I?" "Because most CEOs would. I spent enough of my life proving who I was." She looked at me. "And now?" "Now I'd rather build something that speaks for itself." That became the philosophy of North Star. Build quietly, build well, treat people like people, and never make loyalty the price of employment. The company grew faster than I expected. Within a year, we had offices in 3 countries. Our system was being used by shipping companies, manufacturers, food distributors, and emergency response organizations. We weren't just predicting profits anymore. We were helping companies prevent shortages before they became crises. During one major flood, North Star detected that several medical supply routes would be cut off within 48 hours. Our team worked overnight with regional hospitals. We redirected shipments before the roads closed. No headlines followed. No awards. But the next morning, one hospital administrator sent us an email. "Because of your system, we received the medicine we needed. Thank you." I printed it. It went on the wall. That mattered more to me than any magazine cover. Clara noticed it. "You kept that?" "Yes." "Why?" "Because this is why I built North Star." She smiled. "You're different from when I met you." "How?" You used to look like someone waiting for permission to be happy. I laughed softly. That obvious? To me. She took my hand. I like this version better. I looked at her. So do I. Our relationship developed slowly. There were no grand promises. No rushing. One evening, while we were walking through the roof garden, Clara asked, "Do you ever regret your marriage?" I thought carefully. I regret what it became, not what it was. No. She nodded. That's healthy. I think so. Do you still love her? I didn't answer immediately. Then I said, I care about her. Clara smiled. That wasn't my question. I looked at the city lights. Some people remain part of your heart without remaining part of your life. She squeezed my hand. I understand. That was when I knew I loved Clara. Not because she erased my past. Because she respected it without asking me to live inside it. Meanwhile, Vivian's life had changed in ways I never expected. She stepped down from several public roles. She stopped appearing at every industry event. She started spending weekends away from the city. According to mutual friends, she had become almost obsessed with repairing her relationship with her younger sister, whom she had also neglected for years. She was finally learning something I had learned the hard way. You couldn't postpone life indefinitely. One evening, I received a letter from her. Not a message. A real letter. I opened it at home. She wrote about our marriage. About the night she forgot our anniversary. About the separation agreement. About the way she had spoken about me to investors. Then she wrote something that made me stop. I used to think losing you was the consequence of one terrible mistake. It wasn't. It was the consequence of hundreds of small choices I made because I believed you would always forgive me. I read that sentence twice. She wasn't asking for another chance. She wasn't asking me to return. She was simply admitting the truth. At the end, she wrote, "You were never weak because you stayed. I was careless because I assumed you would." I folded the letter. Clara watched me from the kitchen. Bad? No. Sad? A little. She nodded. Do you want to talk? I smiled. Yes. We sat together. I told her everything. When I finished, Clara said, "Sometimes closure doesn't come from hearing someone say they were wrong. What does it come from? Realizing you no longer need them to admit it." I looked at her. She was right. The letter didn't change my decision, but it changed something inside me. I no longer needed to be angry. Vivian wasn't my enemy. She was simply someone who had once mattered deeply to me and had made choices she would regret for the rest of her life. And I could accept that without reopening the door. A week later, something unexpected happened. Hale Dynamics formally requested a long-term strategic partnership with Northstar. This time, the deal would be enormous. If I accepted, Northstar would gain access to a global network. If I rejected it, we could still grow independently. My board wanted the partnership. I wanted to think. So I visited Hale Dynamics one final time. The building was the same, but it felt smaller. I remembered walking through those halls years earlier, carrying Vivian's lunch because she had forgotten it again. I remembered waiting outside conference rooms. I remembered being introduced as Vivian's husband. Now people whispered when I walked past. That's Ethan Hale, the Northstar founder. I didn't enjoy the attention, but I no longer hated it either. Vivian was waiting in the conference room. She stood when I entered. Thank you for coming. I wanted to hear the proposal myself. She nodded. The presentation began. It was excellent. Fair terms. Strong safeguards. No controlling interest. Northstar would remain independent. When it ended, everyone left. Only Vivian and I remained. She looked at me. I won't ask you to come back. I smiled. Good. She laughed softly. I deserve that. You did. She looked at the contract. I want to know something. What? If you had built Northstar while we were still married, would you have given it to me? I thought about the old notebook. Yes. Her eyes lowered. Why? Because I loved you. She nodded slowly. And now? Now I built it for myself. That answer was the final piece of our story. Not because it was cruel, because it was honest. I signed the partnership. Not as her husband. Not as the man she had once underestimated. As the founder of my own company. When I stood to leave, Vivian said, "Ethan." I turned. "I hope you're happy." I smiled. "I am." The partnership succeeded. Within 18 months, Northstar became one of the most respected logistics technology companies in the region. I was invited to speak at universities. Young engineers asked how I had built the company. They expected some dramatic secret. I always told them the truth. I started with one laptop, one broken idea, and a lot of patience. They laughed. But there was another answer I rarely gave. I built it after realizing that my life could not depend on someone else's attention. That lesson had been more valuable than any business strategy. One autumn evening, Clara and I traveled to the coast. We rented a small house near the sea. No assistants, no meetings, no investors, just two people walking along the water. She kicked off her shoes. You know what? What? I think this is the first time I've seen you completely relaxed. I laughed. I'm getting better at it. She looked at me. Are you? Yes. Then prove it. How? She held out her hand. Dance. Here. There's no one around. I looked at the empty beach. Then I took her hand. We danced badly. We laughed. And for a few minutes, I forgot every difficult year of my life. Later that night, Clara asked me something unexpected. Would you ever get married again? I looked at her. I don't know. She nodded. That's fair. Would you? With you? Yes. She smiled. Maybe. Maybe. I'd want you to choose it because you wanted marriage. I understood what she meant. Not because of fear. Not because of loneliness. Not because I needed someone to validate me. Because I wanted to share a life. I took her hand. I think I might. She smiled. Then maybe. Months passed. We didn't announce anything. We didn't need to. Our relationship simply became part of our lives. One morning, I woke up to find Clara making coffee in the kitchen. She looked at me. Good morning. Good morning. She smiled. You look happy. I am. That simple sentence would once have terrified me, because happiness had once seemed fragile. Now it felt like something I was allowed to build. Then came the final meeting with Vivian. Not planned, not emotional, just unavoidable. We were attending the same industry conference. After my keynote speech, I stepped backstage. Vivian was waiting. She looked older. Not weak. Just changed. I heard your speech. Thank you. You talked about people. Yes. You really built the company around that. I tried. She smiled. You succeeded. There was a long silence. Then she looked at my left hand. There was no wedding ring. Her eyes moved back to mine. Are you happy? Yes. With her? Yes. Vivian nodded. Good. I almost walked away. Then she said, I used to imagine you coming back. I stopped. She continued. After you left, I thought you'd get tired. I thought you'd miss the house. Miss me. Miss our life. I did miss parts of it. I know. But I didn't come back. No. She smiled sadly. Because you finally realized you could survive without me. I shook my head. No. She looked confused. Because I realized I could live without abandoning myself. She became very still. That was the sentence I had spent years trying to understand. Vivian nodded. I think that's the difference. I looked at her. You're doing better too. I am. Good. I don't want you to worry about me. I don't. She laughed. Of course you don't. Then she said, I wanted to apologize one last time. You already did. I know. She looked down. But I needed to say it without expecting anything from you. I nodded. I accept. Her eyes filled with tears. Thank you. I turned toward the exit. Ethan. I looked back. She smiled. Goodbye. This time, the word didn't feel like a wound. It felt complete. Goodbye, Vivian. I walked away. Outside, Clara was waiting. She looked at my face. Everything okay? I nodded. Yes. Ready? I looked toward the city. Then at her. More than ever. She took my hand. We walked toward the lights together. Behind us was a life I had once believed I could never survive losing. Ahead of me was a life I had built with my own hands. And for the first time, I understood the real meaning of that foolish post I had written years earlier. No wife, no rules. I had thought I was joking about marriage. But the truth was deeper. I had spent years living by rules I had never written. Be patient. Don't complain. Wait for her. Forgive her. Stay quiet. Understand her. Make yourself smaller so her world can remain large. Leaving didn't teach me how to stop loving. It taught me how to love myself without turning someone else into the center of my existence. Vivian lost a husband. I lost a marriage. But neither of us lost everything. She rebuilt her company. I built North Star. She learned to slow down. I learned to move forward. And somewhere along the way, I found Clara. Not as a replacement. Not as a reward. As a person who chose me without needing me to disappear first. Years later, when people asked me what happened between Vivian and me, I never called it revenge. Because it wasn't. The greatest victory wasn't becoming more successful than her. It wasn't seeing her regret leaving me. It wasn't building a company she eventually needed. It was waking up one morning and realizing I no longer checked my phone hoping to see her name. I no longer wondered whether she missed me. I no longer needed her to admit I had mattered. I knew I had, and that was enough. I had finally built a life that didn't need her permission to be meaningful. And that was the life I chose to keep. Sometimes because they simply don't understand what they have until it is gone. But another person's failure to value you is not proof that you lacked value. That was the lesson I had carried through every difficult year. A decade passed faster than I expected. North Star became much larger than I had ever imagined. But I refused to let it become the same kind of machine Hail Dynamics had once been. We established employee ownership. We funded technical scholarships. We created emergency grants for workers facing family crises. And every year, I spent 1 month away from the office. No meetings. No calls unless absolutely necessary. Just family. Clara and I eventually had 2 children. A daughter who loved drawing and a son who dismantled every electronic device he could find. Our house was rarely quiet. There were toys in hallways, shoes by the door, half-finished science projects on the kitchen table. Sometimes I would stand there watching them and think about the man I had been years earlier. The man who believed his entire life was inside one marriage. I wished I could go back and tell him something. You are not difficult to love. You are not too ordinary. You are not a burden because someone is too busy to notice you. You are allowed to leave places where you have to beg to matter. You are allowed to start again without destroying anyone. And most importantly, you don't have to become cruel just because someone was careless with your heart. Vivian and I never became close again, but we occasionally crossed paths. Hail Dynamics survived. It became a smaller, healthier company under new leadership. Vivian eventually stepped down as CEO. She started a foundation supporting women in technology and young entrepreneurs who lacked financial backing. Once, she sent me a message. I think I finally built the company I wanted to build in the beginning. I replied, I'm glad. She wrote back, me too. That was all. No longing, no regret, no attempt to reopen the past. Just peace. Years later, my daughter asked me a question while we were eating dinner. Dad, yes. Why do people get divorced? I almost choked on my water. Clara laughed. My son looked up from his plate. I thought carefully. Sometimes 2 people love each other but don't know how to take care of each other. My daughter frowned. Then why don't they just learn? Sometimes they do. And sometimes they learn too late. She seemed satisfied with that answer. Then she asked, Did you learn? I looked at Clara. She smiled. Yes. My daughter nodded. Good. Then she returned to her dinner. Children could make complicated things feel simple. That night, after everyone was asleep, I went into my study. On the bookshelf was an old photograph. Vivian and me outside the courthouse. The rain. The cheap umbrella. The beginning of everything. Beside it was a photograph of Clara and me on our wedding day. 2 different lives. 2 different versions of me. I didn't throw the first photograph away. I didn't need to. It belonged to the past. And the past didn't have to be destroyed to make room for the future. I kept it because it reminded me of something important. I had once loved deeply. I had once been hurt deeply. And I had survived without becoming bitter. That mattered. My phone buzzed. A message from Clara. Are you coming to bed? I smiled. 5 minutes. She replied immediately. You said that 20 minutes ago. I laughed. Some things never changed. I turned off the light and walked upstairs. As I passed the children's rooms, I heard my son's sleepy voice. Dad. I opened the door. What? Can I ask you something? Sure. Are you happy? I looked at him. Then I smiled. Yes. He yawned. Good. He turned over and fell asleep. I stood there for a moment. Then I closed the door. Walking back to our bedroom, I thought about the post that had started everything. No wife, no rules. It had been a stupid joke written by a lonely man on his 5th anniversary. But Vivian's reply had exposed something neither of us wanted to admit. You have one. She was right. I did have a wife. But at that moment, I had forgotten something more important. I also had myself. And when that marriage ended, I didn't lose myself with it. I found myself. I found my ambition. I found my voice. I found people who valued me without needing to control me. I found a woman who loved the person I became instead of demanding that I remain the person she had once taken for granted. And I built a family that never made me wonder whether I belonged. That was my real ending. Not Vivian regretting me. Not North Star becoming successful. Not the divorce. Not even Clara. The real ending was waking up one ordinary morning years later, hearing my family laughing downstairs, and realizing that I no longer needed anyone from my past to understand my worth. I had stopped fighting for a place in someone else's life. I had stopped waiting to be chosen. I had chosen myself. And then I built a life around that choice. A peaceful life. A difficult life. A beautiful life. Mine. And if there was one thing I would tell the younger version of myself, the man sitting alone at a kitchen counter on his 5th anniversary, staring at 3 words on a screen, it would be this. You don't need to destroy the person who broke your heart. You don't need revenge. You don't even need them to regret losing you. Sometimes the strongest answer is simply to walk away, become whole again, and build a life so full that the old question no longer matters. Because the greatest revenge isn't making someone miss you. It's reaching the day when you realize you don't miss who you were when you needed them. And that was the day I finally understood what freedom meant. 3 years after my divorce, North Star reached the point I had once considered impossible. We went public. The morning the announcement was made, my team filled the headquarters. Lena stood beside me near the windows, staring at the city. Do you remember the old office? The radiator? The radiator. We both laughed. That thing sounded like it wanted to kill us. It probably did. The stock market opened. North Star's valuation climbed. Phones started ringing. Reporters gathered outside. Investors congratulated us. But I found myself thinking about something much smaller. A handwritten note from a hospital administrator. A sentence from an employee who had been able to attend her daughter's graduation because we didn't demand she work through the weekend. The 6 people who had believed in me when nobody knew my name. Those were the things I considered success. Money was useful. Recognition was nice. But neither could replace peace. That evening, Clara and I had dinner at home. She placed a small box beside my plate. What is this? Open it. Inside was a key. I looked at her. A key. To the house I bought. I laughed. You bought a house? Technically, we bought a house. I stared at her. She smiled. You've spent years building a future without asking anyone for permission. I held the key. So I think it's time we stop treating our future like a temporary arrangement. My throat tightened. Clara. She reached across the table. I don't need a wedding to prove anything. I know, but I want one. I looked at her hand, then at her. Yes. She blinked. Yes. Yes. She laughed. That's it. What do you want me to do? Something dramatic. I stood. She looked suspicious. I walked around the table and knelt. Her eyes widened. Ethan, I know you said you didn't need a grand gesture. I don't. But I think I want to make one anyway. I took her hand. Clara, I spent years believing love meant holding on no matter how much of yourself you lost. She listened quietly. You taught me that love can also mean being seen. Her eyes filled. I don't want a perfect marriage. Good. I want an honest one. Better. And I want to spend the rest of my life building something with you. She smiled through her tears. Yes. I slipped the ring onto her finger. It wasn't extravagant. It didn't need to be. It simply felt right. A few months later, we married in a small garden ceremony. Lena gave a speech. Marcus gave an even longer one. Someone accidentally spilled wine on the wedding cake. Everyone laughed. And when Clara walked toward me, I felt no fear, no obligation, no pressure, just certainty. After the ceremony, I noticed someone standing near the back. Vivian. She hadn't been invited. She hadn't crashed the wedding. She had simply come to the public reception afterward because she had been attending an event nearby and had heard the news. Our eyes met. For a moment, the years between us disappeared. Then she smiled. I walked over. You came. I wanted to congratulate you. Thank you. She looked toward Clara. She seems wonderful. She is. Vivian nodded. I can see that. We stood in silence. Then she said, I finally stopped asking myself why you didn't come back. I waited. I understand now. What changed? She smiled faintly. I realized I was still thinking of your leaving as something you did to me. I said nothing. But you didn't leave to hurt me. No. You left because staying was hurting you. Yes. She took a slow breath. I wish I'd understood that sooner. So do I. She looked at my wedding ring. You look happy. I am. I can tell. Her smile was genuine. Then she extended her hand. Friends. I considered it. Not because I owed her. Because enough time had passed. I think we can be people who wish each other well. She nodded. I'll take that. We shook hands. Then Vivian walked away. I watched her disappear into the crowd. And strangely, I felt no sadness. Only gratitude. Not gratitude for the pain, but for what I had learned from surviving it. Later that night, Clara found me alone on the balcony. You okay? I nodded. I'm good. She leaned against me. Did you need closure? I thought about it. No. Then why did you talk to her? Because some endings don't need to be bitter. Clara smiled. That sounds like you. I looked at the city. Lights stretched across the horizon. Once, I had stood in that same kind of city darkness wondering whether my marriage had ended because I wasn't enough. Now I knew better. Sometimes people hurt each other because they are afraid. Sometimes because they are selfish.